Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes. I'm your host, Sean Malone. I'm the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of the Out of Frame video series on YouTube. Here today on it's effectively our Christmas special. This is
the Christmas special of all Christmas specials.
The Christmas special of all Christmas specials. You may have noticed this is a little bit different if you're watching us, and if you're not, then we are joined today by some very, very special guests. Of course, in studio with me is Paul Nelson, Jen Mafasante, and now we have the directors of Fatman, Ian and Esham Nelms. How are you guys doing?
Good. Good to be here.
Good. Thank you for having us.
We're so thrilled that you guys could join us. Anybody who listened to us a year ago, roughly, heard us gush, just superfluously about the film Fatman. And of course, we then rewatched it recently, and just the fact that you guys are willing to come on and talk about it a little bit for, the next hour or so is just amazing to us. We're very, very looking forward to this. So thank you guys for joining us.
It's our
Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys.
It's absolutely our pleasure.
So I know we're all going to have a lot to say about this. I think Paul probably more than anybody. But I guess I just want to start and just ask the question for you guys, like what inspired this film in the first place? It's such a unique entry into what can be a very cliched genre, I think. And you guys made something that I certainly think is one of the most original and inventive films I've seen in many years, and in particular as a Christmas movie.
I mean, we could say that there's
awesome
a lot of contributions to the Santa genre, right?
Yeah.
And they all kind of have a very overlap, right? It's been very, you either have the warm and fuzzy holiday special, or you have a sociopath that wants to come down your chimney and hack you up. And Ian and I were like, well, what if we made Santa a superhero? Right? That's sort of honestly the germ of the idea. It was like, hey, we've seen him as a sociopath. We've seen him as, jolly old Saint Nick. And what if we just made him a total badass?
Yeah, Ian, do you have anything to add to that?
I just remember reflecting. It was last year when we were doing our, the publicity tour for it. I remember us reflecting on sort of the first DVDs that we ever bought that ended up having a lot to do with this film, because we wrote this film now, I think 15, 16 years ago. It took a while for us to get it made because it is so kind of crazy. But we were taking a ton of meetings. We were, and everyone was excited about it, but they were like, yeah, someday somebody's going to make this, that was the story we kept getting. And looking back at the first DVDs we ever owned, Esham bought Unbreakable, and I bought Unforgiven. So if you can kind of see how a Western undertone starts kind of feeding into this realistic hero story.
Yeah.
And you're taking an icon, you're taking like Santa. And at this point, everyone's probably more familiar with like a Coca-Cola style Santa Claus or a Tim Allen style Santa Claus. And I think there was like a Black Christmas that was coming out either around then or a couple of years after we had written it. And we were just pining for something different. We were really pining for something that felt real, and it can be fun and have fun with it. But we really felt like we wanted something that grounded it and could maybe, start to dive into like maybe what are the realities of that mythos that exists, and how could it have possibly, is there a real world where this maybe could exist? And then we started wrapping our head around, okay, well, if he's really going to do it, he's not going to be in the North Pole. That doesn't logistically make a lot of sense, and then we started trying to frame where he actually would be. And then of course there'd be some kind of, government intervention or some kind of, they would have known about him by now. So he would have had to cut a deal with somebody, and he probably would be the United States. We just started kind of going down the lane, and it started kind of, I wouldn't say writing itself, because we rewrote it over and over, a lot of parts of it as we were honing it over the 14 years. But yeah, the germ of the story and the idea for the story and the character came pretty quickly. And then it was just us sort of digression into kind of how it would all exist,
Mm-hmm. So when
we also had two,
go on.
Two short stories that we had each crafted separately. And Ian's was more of like an origin story of Kris Kringle, and mine was more of like in a more contemporary vibe. And it was really interesting because when we ultimately sat down to do the screenplay, we used a ton of the prequel material from Ian's story in like building out his character and his backstory. And Ian and I really enjoy making sort of like the every man and woman and dropping them into extraordinary circumstances. And for us, like Kris Kringle and Mrs. Claus, they're just normal people that have inherited these abilities and this job.
There are a lot of things when I first saw this movie. One of the things I said, and it's going to be interesting to me to say this to you guys because I feel like it's one of these, like, I hope you take it in the spirit that it is intended, which is that it seems like such an unlikely movie to get greenlit to me. And you guys kind of hit on that anyway, taking meetings and kind of getting that story, but it's such a strange idea. And I think in most people's hands, it probably wouldn't have worked very well. And so I want to give that maybe more as a compliment to you guys than anything. I really think that what you created was such an off-the-wall concept. And I think we should probably get into a little bit of the plot for those who are listening who haven't seen it yet. But it's such an off-the-wall idea that if it was handled poorly, I think it probably would have fallen apart. But what you guys made, and I think a lot of it, Esham, what you just said about the relationship between, Kris Kringle and Mrs. Claus, and I don't know where, I think that relationship really pulls it all together. And I got to say, I mean, it's amazing to me, just sort of the relationship between, Mel Gibson, not the relationship, but the actual acting between Mel Gibson and Marianne Jean-Baptiste is incredibly believable and incredibly grounded, and it just feels like a real relationship. For me, I think if that hadn't worked, I think a lot of the rest of it would have felt so over the top that it wouldn't have come together as something that I actually bought into. But because I did, I really actually bought into those characters. I wanted to root for them, and also it's nice to have a movie that is kind of an R-rated, kind of insane take on the Santa mythos without Santa being the evil one, right? Like, he's actually still a very, very good character.
Yeah. So so you guys wrote Fatman 15 years or so ago. What was the catalyst that went from getting the meetings to finally getting into production, and how did that happen?
So we went from taking a lot of meetings with people saying, someone's going to make this. And then we started making other movies because it was really like, we realized pretty quickly it ended up being just kind of a cool spec script that would get us in the door to a lot of places. And they would say, this is cool. This is great. You're never going to make this. Somebody will. It's not going to be you guys. And we're like, well, why not? And we're new, bright-eyed, guys in town. We're like, okay, well, why isn't it going to be us? And they're just like, well, because this is director dependent. This material is director dependent, is what they call it, director dependent. So because it mixes so many genres, and because it's not easy. You can't read that script and think, oh, I see what it's going to be. It's a perfect, easy drama. It's almost like, you need a filmmaker behind it so that you can say, okay, I've seen this guy's other 2 or 3 films, or I've seen another film by this person. So I can kind of see what they're going to do with the humor and the action and the drama. And I can see how that kind of all melts together because they did that in a previous film. And we didn't have that. So they were like, well, someday someone's going to make this. And it's such a great spec script. Thanks, guys, for coming in. And we're like, okay, great. So we started making little films. Go ahead, Ash.
I just remember people were like, well, is it dramatic? Is it funny? Is it action? And we'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that was what we sort of like at different times for us. We enjoy movies that throw different gears, right? And if you can navigate between those different subtleties and shifts, that's exciting for us. That's the movies we love.
I feel like you guys are really smart to have different. It's almost like there are different tones for different characters. And so there's sort of different modes that kind of come together when different characters are on screen. I think you mentioned that this sort of, mustache twirling little kid, and that is kind of a tone all by itself. But it works if it's sort of, confined to that kid. I think if that was like the entirety of the villain structure, it would be too much. It was like what I was saying. Like, I think a lot of these things, like if you had any one of those elements that were dominating too much, I think it wouldn't work quite as well. But I think you balanced it incredibly well. And I also get why, not knowing the directors, right? Not knowing that you guys were going to be able to do this and pull it off. It is a really tricky you know, it's a tricky sort of needle to thread, I think, and you guys handled it really well.
Yeah. What I found so interesting is that you guys, your story right now, our audience is usually pretty younger, starting out in their careers, and you guys were having these meetings, like you said, but instead of taking those no's, you guys went and created something, and I love that. That's actually fantastic. I think that's a great model for somebody that's wanting to break into this. So, would you guys say that's probably?
Yeah, I could give you the quick abbreviated. It'd probably take me 2 hours if we went through the whole thing, which is fun stuff. But I don't want to bore you guys. But so like we went and made a $1,500 film that got into some film festivals. Then we made a $5,000 film with about 5 or 4 of our other friends, and that one won all the festivals that we got into before, and then some. And then we went and wrote a lot, and we got a lot of representation. And they were like, "Hey, stop making these little movies. Like, let's go make something big." And at that time, in the early to mid 2000s, like the next movie was like a $5 million movie for Miramax or a $5 million movie for Focus, or like they had a stepping stone. Once you've kind of proved yourself on the festival circuit, you went out, you got Eric Stoltz in your project, and you went and made it for $2 or $3 to $5 million, depending on how big it was or how cool it was, and that was kind of the trajectory. Well, we had Fatman as our example, and they would say, well, this is a little too big. If you're going to make something, you got to write something a little smaller. So we said, okay, great. We're going to write something that's in the kind of $5 million zone. We wrote it, and then right as we get it going and cast it up and rolling, of course, the financial crunch of 2008 happens. And then what also happened was a giant SAG strike. And then there was also all in 2008, DVD market started to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And a writer's strike. So like all this shit, was it a writer's strike? Not a SAG strike. Maybe it was a writer's strike. So all this
the writer's strike in 2008, right? Or 2009, right? I think. Yeah.
Something like that.
So all this stuff happened right at the same time. And then on the other side of all that, the company that was going to do it came to us and said, "Hey, that $5 million film we were going to make, like, can you do it for $2 to $2.5 million?" And we were like, "Oh my God, like we can't do that for $2.5 million. Like let us go write something. We're going to go write something, and we're going to come back for $2 million. And I guess we'll go the $2 million, the $5 million, then Fatman. That was our idea. So we wrote the $2 million version, which ended up being Small Town Crime. We wrote that movie, and we were like, okay, this is going to be the $2 million movie. We come back to them like 10 months later. It was maybe like early 2010 at that point. We said, hey, we got that $2 million movie. What do you guys think? They're like, this is great, but I'm sorry, it's 2010. It's been almost 2 years. And like now, not only has the DVD market started going away, but the bottom of it is really falling out. There's no there's no market for these anymore in this home video. There's no real home video market anymore, which was what was buoying those $2 to $3 million films. Right. And they said now, like the entry level right now is about $200,000, and we said, okay, we can't make this for $200,000. Let's go write another movie. So we went and wrote another movie called Lost on Purpose. And it was basically like, okay, nobody's going to stop us from making this movie. So we wrote the $200,000 movie. We went and raised our own cash, and then we went and cast it with, every favor we had at the time. Mm-hmm. And we went and made that movie, and it went and sort of won about 20 film festivals, like B+ film festivals. There was no Sundance or South by for that film, but like we did really well in Canada and a few festivals, and then a ton of United States festivals. And then from there, like someone saw that film at a festival and said, hey, I've got $500,000 to make this book that I have the rights to. Are you guys game to take a read at it and look at the script that I've written? Her name was Autumn McAlpin. And we read the script, and we were like, okay, this is like a $20 million script. She's like, yeah, I'm kind of caught in development hell at a couple of companies, and we're stuck. And I have $500,000 raised. Would you guys think you could make this? Read the book. See if you can make this. Read the book. We came back to her with a pitch of sort of how we'd shape her script into something that we could do for $500,000. And Esh and I had spent some time in the restaurant business. So this movie, Waffle Street, it's about a guy who's running a $1 billion hedge fund. Maybe it was a $30 billion hedge fund. $30 billion hedge fund. He gets caught up in the financial crisis and gets blamed for his company's nefarious activities in the housing market. And he kind of goes down, takes a bullet for them. And then he goes to work at a Waffle House and has to rebuild himself with Danny Glover sort of riding him and turning him into a real boy. It's a very Pinocchio story. And he rebuilds himself and comes out of it a better person. we did that movie with Danny Glover and James Lafferty, and that one did really well. And the producers came back to us and said, "Hey, what else do you guys have?" And we said, "We've got this nothing like Waffle Street, which is more of a family geared film, wholesome film." We were like, "We've got these thrillers that we love and we wrote and that we really want to make." And they were like, "All right, well, show us one. We've got about $2 million." So we said, "Oh my God, okay. So hey, here's Small Town Crime." They read it and they were like, "Whoa, okay, we really dig this. Like, can you cast this up?" And we were like, "Let's see." So the first person we reached out to was Octavia Spencer, who we'd known since 2002 when she was struggling actress Octavia Spencer, now turned Academy Award winning Octavia Spencer. And she's a huge crime thriller fan. So she's like, "Oh, we had just shown her this trailer for Waffle Street, and she was a huge Danny Glover fan. And she was like, "Oh my God, y'all got Danny Glover? I love Danny Glover." And she's like, what are you doing now? What movie are you doing now?" And we said, "Well, we've got this crime thriller we're pitching." And she's like, "Ooh, let me read it. We show her the lookbook that we had, and she's like, "This looks great, y'all. Just give me the script. Let me read it." Like 36 hours later, she calls us. She's like, "I'm EPing this. This is awesome. I love this. Is there a role I could play, like a cop or something? Just I'd love to be in it and help out that way too." And we're like, "All right, well, actually, let us think on this." And we went away, and the next morning we called them and we said, "Hey, what do you think about playing the sister?" Because it would be really funny, we thought, to have this, kind of role reversal, as you see like The Blind Side and whatnot, these white families, picking up this kid and rebuilding him. We were like, well, what if it's like the reverse Blind Side, where we have this well-to-do black family pick up this white guy, and he's a complete mess, and he screws up their lives and screws up their whole family. But they still love him and try to help him out, but he's a complete train wreck. And she was like, "I love that." And then she was like, "All right, bring your list. Like, who do you want in the lead?" And we all landed on John Hawkes for the lead. And then she's like, "Who do you want to play my husband?" And we were like, "Anthony Anderson." And she was like, "All right, I know him." She's like, "We actually get our nails done at the same salon. Let me see if I can run into him." And she didn't run into him at the nail parlor, but she ran into him at a party somewhere. And she's like, "I pitched it to him. He read the script, y'all. He's pumped about it. He's down to do it. Let's just find a time we can get him in." And then it was set. We had our sort of dynamic trio, and for those three, they funded us, and we went to Utah and shot it. And man, we got into South by with it, and that really was the turning point, because that movie mixes exactly what Fatman mixes, but it mixes it in a very well-known genre. We were able to attack something like a crime thriller, and kind of put our voice into it with our comedy and our action and our drama.
Yeah. So when people were like, "What's the tone of Fatman?" we're like, "Well, it's like that."
That's a phenomenal story. I think it speaks to just in a way just being prepared for all kinds of opportunities as they arise, and not really being so stuck. I think I see this a lot when I talk to younger people, especially, where they sort of have a vision of exactly the order of operations that their whole career and their life is going to go. And then when it kind of veers off in a different direction, they don't really know what to do, because they had it sort of in their head that it was only going to be, first I do this, and then I do that, and then I do this. But it sounds to me like you guys had just, first of all, tons of interesting ideas, but also just were really prepared for any opportunity as they arose, and then capitalized on those in really, really smart ways. That's a really cool story.
I feel like it was a combination of a couple of things. Like, it was like, we'd been in town since 2002, and these opportunities, like little opportunities would pop up, and it was like, we had this. Exactly. We being those naive filmmakers came into town and had this big ladder of like, okay, we're going to go make this $20 million film first. Yeah, that's going to work. And then everyone kind of hits you with the reality of like, well, someone may make that, but it's not going to be you. It's going to be someone else that's already worked their way up those ladders. Yeah. And then we realized, we got to build a smaller ladder to get to that big ladder. And then we just realized we needed about 10 more small ladders to get up to that big ladder. We were even planning after Small Town Crime. We're like, okay, we probably have another movie or two to get to Fatman, just because of the size of it. But I mean, luckily the reps that we had were like, they looked at our material and they were like, hey, this one is so unique. It's so crazy. It's so you guys. Like, we think this is the one you should do next. And let's just go see if we can, let's go see, who do you guys want in this? Like, let's go see if we can use small town crime to show them in this script and see if you can snag somebody, see if you can snag who you want. And that brings us right to Fatman, because Esham and I were at a screening of Hacksaw Ridge, and Mel comes out with his giant beard, and he's on the award circuit. So he's doing all the Q&As for best director and best film. And he was like bent over, you know, like exhausted, but like still passion and fire in the eyes. And we were just like, he had that giant beard, and we were just completely smitten with him. It just looked like a guy that was really carrying a lot on his shoulders, but still had a lot of passion, you know, and was exhausted, but he needed some help, or he needed a break, or he needed a whatever. It just felt like we were envisioning this character on him. You know, we were just like, this is the guy. Oh my God. Just watching him talk to the crowd. We were like, this is him. It's gotta be him. And so we went out to him.
Yeah. Were you able to connect with him there, or did you have to go through his reps and do all that kind of stuff?
Oh no, it was a process. It was a process. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Go ahead,
fascinated.
did you want to take it?
I mean, well, we had to definitely formally submit through his representation. We kind of had, like, we're stuck on him for about a year before we got to actually, like, before the engine started turning and all that. And then I remember we had sent it off. We'd written him a letter, complimenting how great he looked in a beard, and amongst other things. And then we just waited, right? And we're twiddling our thumbs. And it'd been a couple weeks, and it'd gone through CAA, and we're like, oh man, like this is the blow off. This is where, you know, we're getting ghosted. And home writing, because it's like on to the next, right? So you're sitting there, you're writing, you're thinking about new projects, you're thinking about, you know, who's the next in the queue. And Ian gets an email.
Yeah, and it said, hey, I love the script. It's really funny. Let's sit down for a chin wag. And we were like, okay, a chin wag, first off. But we were getting a lot of emails. We were getting a lot of emails from producers and financiers and people that were reading the script before we had cast, and we're just like, hey, this is really interesting. I watched your movie. I read the script. Like, come in, let's talk about it. Who do you guys want to play? Who do you guys want to cast in this? Like, we're interested. And it would just be a general meeting to talk about possibilities and would they back some offers to actors and those types of things. And we'd probably done about half a dozen of those meetings at that point. And, you know, they were still kind of pouring in. And we were like, okay, well, who is this? Is this another financier, you know, that's like, hey, I'm interested in sitting down with you to talk about possibilities. And so I just wrote him back. I was like, oh, thank you so much. You know, that's awesome. Glad you responded to the script. You know, we'd love to chat with you. Who is this?
and it's not like the email was like brave dude 25. You know what I'm saying?
And there was no sign off. It didn't have a name at the end of it. The email address is completely, you know, seemingly random. You know, there's no giveaway in the email address. So I was like, okay, well, who is this guy? And he writes me back, you know, within an hour or so. And he's like, hey, sorry, I forget to sign off sometimes. This is Mel. And we were just like, holy shit. I think we hugged.
We definitely hugged.
And I think we just kept wandering around the house for a couple of hours saying, he likes it. I mean, he says it's funny. He said he thought it was funny. He must like it, right? You know, and then his reps get in touch with our reps, and they were like, hey, go sit down for an hour at a cafe in Malibu and talk to him, and just you see if you guys, you know, gel on your idea for what this movie's going to be. And of course, you know, we're nervous. We're big fans of his. So we sit down with him, and you know, 3 hours later, we emerged from this diner, you know, hugging and laughing, and just, man, he really got it. He really got the script. He really got us. You know, it was really cool to hear him at one point say, and this is what sealed it for us. We were like, you know, like, how much you're going to have to explain to your actor or try to, you know, to figure out. He got it instinctively, immediately. He was like, and he told us, he said, you know what it is? It's that scene where I'm looking out at the elves. He's like, and I'm trying to tell them that this is like you know, that we got this military contract we have to do. And he's like, and I just feel like I should be like, I'm about ready to cry. Like, this is the worst day of my life. This is terrible. I can't believe I have to tell them this. I feel like I betrayed them. I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna weep, and like I'm welling up. We're like, yes, that's it. That's it.
That
and
scene, that scene is shockingly powerful. Like
it really is.
That moment in that film, I feel like there are a lot of reasons to root for his version of Kris Kringle, and there's a lot of reasons to like the character and to feel good about him as a person. But like to see him actually care so much, and to say to number 7 also, he said, if there was any other way that we could make this work, I promise you I would be doing it. But that was just kind of mind blowing to me, because it's one of those moments too where you see a really talented actor in a film, and you just kind of see the power that somebody like that can bring to the screen when it's done well. And it's such a subtle moment, but I'm so glad you guys brought that up, because it's one of my absolute favorite parts of the film, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
Such a good moment. Go on. Sorry,
after he tells us about, how he's going to cry, and he wants to be right at the verge of crying, and it's the worst thing he's ever had to, he's being consoled by his wife. It's the worst thing he's ever had to tell these guys, and he can't believe he has to say it. And we're like, yeah, exactly. He goes, and I think that's what's going to make it so funny. And we're all, exactly. Like, he totally got it.
Yeah. No, I think that's dead on also. I mean, I think, again, I keep coming back to this, but I just don't think it works if you don't buy into that character, and if you don't really believe that he cares and that he has reasons for working with the U.S. military, that he's doing all this stuff. And it just comes together. Jen, I feel like I've bogarted most of this conversation so far. I'm sure you've got a million questions. I'd love for you to have a chance here.
Well, this is going to go back to the chemistry between Kris and Ruth Kringle in the movie. I was sitting and watching this movie for the first time with my husband, and we've been married for 10 years. We've been together for 13. And I guarantee you, we've had almost exactly those same kinds of arguments in the kitchen. Like, are those my good towels? Excuse me? And just like the really long-term relationship flirting that goes on and all of that good stuff. And it felt like a very real long-term relationship to me. And I mean,
I would love.
So first of all, well done. Second of all, how did you do it?
Yeah, I would love to know that. How did you cast Marianne Jean-Baptiste, and how was that relationship with her and Mel, and how did that? I'd love to hear about that for sure.
One thing, first of all, like Ian, I'm not married at this point, but I am happily dating in a long-term relationship. But Ian's married, so he understands a lot of that vibe. I understand that vibe. I've been in a long-term relationship. And also, like, we looked to our parents for a lot of inspiration. I mean, we've literally seen that conversation between our mom and our dad, witnessed it firsthand in the kitchen. And so we're like, oh, yeah, remember when, like, and our mom loves to bake. So it was loosely inspired by some of those interactions with our parents. I think also when we talked to Mel and Marianne about it, they were just like, oh yeah, they're both married. Marianne's married, Mel has been married, and Mel's like, oh yeah, they're an old married couple. We got this. And we would just honestly like cut them loose in the kitchen, and they would be, and for all those scenes, and they'd be throwing little improvs and like slapping each other with the towel. That's not like she slaps him with the towel, not written in the script, but they understand the vibe, right? Like they're throwing lots of little improvisations in there for us. And Ian and I are just like kids in a candy store. We're like, oh, let's just do it again so we can just see what other little nuances they're going to add to this.
Did you guys go through a casting process? Was Mel? I assume Mel was part of that process because he was the first person you brought on, right? Is that true, or did you have other people in mind? Yeah. So was he part of the casting process for Ruth?
I mean, he was
run our ideas by him.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That relationship just works so well.
Yeah, it's one of the best married relationships on TV. I feel like, or on screen, I feel like most of the time it's just done so poorly and not believable. But we have Santa Claus.
I know. It's just
and Ruth Kringle having a down-to-earth conversation about towels.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I never knew I needed this in my life, but now it is.
I think like I said, like Ash was saying, I think it just came from letting them go, because they would run the scene. And then at the end of it, they would start improvising with each other and goofing around with each other and ribbing each other and giving each other a little bit of shit and like joking with each other. And it felt like a real couple. And I mean, I remember, like Esh was saying, that Mel and Marianne were like, oh yeah, we're both married. We've both been married for a long time. Like, this is like, we get this. We know this dynamic. We have it with our spouse, like, yeah, okay, we're going to be able to pick this back up and put it into this. So they did a lot of that. I mean, and Mel and Marianne would come with new stuff every time, which was really fun. And like I said, we kept saying, let's do another one. And they're like, did we get it? Do you guys feel good? We're like, no, we got it. We just want to see what you tag the end with this time.
So, shifting gears a little bit, the primary villain in the movie, played by Walton Goggins, I think he is one of the, I mean, there's aspects of it that are things that I've seen him do before, particularly on Justified and stuff like that. But it's such a unique villain. Was it always kind of written into the script that way, or did he bring a lot to that role that kind of wasn't there initially?
Well, I think Esh froze. Either that or he's very still. Oh, there he is. He's back.
I'm back.
You were still for a minute, man. Still as ice. So we had a lot of the quirky stuff written into the script, but I mean, look, when you cast, every actor you cast would have done something slightly different with it. And we took about half a dozen meetings with people we were really excited about doing the role. And I just remember, every one of them we were excited about for different reasons. We're like, oh yeah, he's going to be great for this little part. Oh yeah, he's going to do a great job with this thing. And oh yeah, it's going to be great to see what he does with this. And then when we sat down with Walton and we went to this diner and within 5 minutes, he's up on his feet, shouting lines from the script, acting like he's aiming a gun at an elf, very intensely in the moment. And everyone's like turning and staring like, what is going on over there?
Pulp Fiction moment that's happening in this diner.
And man, he is dialed and he is in character. And we're just kind of staring at him going, oh my God, this guy's killing it. And I remember he sat down and Esh, I think after the meeting, we both realized at that point, like, he really understood the character really well. He had a lot of cool ideas for how, just the way he was punching lines, you could tell that it was going to be really funny and really dark and creepy and really interesting.
Yeah.
And we'd seen his work, we're big fans of his work. So we knew that he's pretty mesmerizing on screen, which is what we wanted. I mean, there's an allusion to him being a bit of a snake person in the film. And I mean, I think Walton, embodies that to a certain degree, especially in this film. He's very kind of smooth and slimy, and we wanted him to, like, one of the biggest notes we gave him was he's like, well, what do you guys want out of this character? And we're like, well, the biggest thing we want out of him is that he's unpredictable, because that's probably the most terrifying thing you can think of, is that you don't really know what you're going to get from this guy in each scene from him. And he was like, oh yeah, I love that. And then he just took and ran with it. And I mean, that guy's such a pro. It was literally just like, cut him loose and see what he brings. And then it's just tiny. It's such tiny little, oh, try this, try that, as he goes and just does his thing, because and same with Mel and Marianne. I mean, they're just such talented people. I mean, that's the hardest part, right? Is getting people that are just going to dominate that role, so that you don't have to work too hard, while you're making the movie, that it's just such slight adjustments because they have an understanding or they do their homework or they're going to bring such gravitas to that role.
I also think that Walton's like a fountain of suggestions, and there are so many outtakes. Probably a movie in itself. I mean, there's so many different versions. It was so hard because Ian and I ended up editing the film, and it's so hard to pick the best ones, right? And Ian and I were cobbling together like, oh, we love this and that take. But I remember one point he came to us kind of early on. He goes, y'all, could I get a scene in a Chinese restaurant? And we're like, well, yeah. What are you going to be doing in there, you think? And he's like, eating. And we're like, okay. And so it's like, so Ian and I went back and we were like, okay, Chinese restaurant. And we threw some stuff in there, like the duck, which, for us was a little throwback to Christmas Story and things like that.
Yeah.
And then we just like let Walton be Walton in there, and let Walton be the skinny man in there. And it was really fun working with him because I wouldn't say he's totally method, but he's always got the skinny man simmering under the surface when he's on set. And so you'd be like, "Hey, Walton, you want a latte or something like that?" And then the skinny man would turn to you and have you talk to you in the skinny man's voice, and you'd be like, and then people, the camera team and everybody just started calling him Skinny. And like, "Hey, Skinny, can you slide over a little bit?" And he loved it. He was totally into it.
The duck, you brought it up, the callback to A Christmas Story, one of my personal favorite Christmas movies. But
we talked about that as well.
That's one thing about this movie that I very much enjoy is we talk a lot about on our show about show don't tell, and I think Fatman you guys did a fantastic job of doing that. Everything that was on screen for a reason, and I think one that exemplifies it the most is when the military shows up and they're trying to hammer those nails. And they're just incompetent at everything they do. And it pays off at the end of the movie when Skinny Man comes through and does his thing. It all makes sense. So did you guys, how did you get, because it seems like in today's day and age, it's hard for some reason to do that. So was that a main focus of you guys while you were writing or on set?
I mean, especially with something like that. Go ahead, sorry.
Like I would say this, like Ian and I definitely have a tendency to be nuanced, and sometimes to a fault. Like we hate exposition. We hate leading people by the nose. Like we want you to, watch the movie and come to your own conclusions based on what the visuals and in dialogue and scenes are presenting to you. We hate grabbing people and saying, "Hey, this is what we want you to think. This is what we want you to take away from that." Like it's all chummed in there, right? It's all in there. But we're definitely like you have a perspective and then laying that out for you. But it's like there is always pressure to just need you to say that, like you just say that, and it's like for us that takes all the fun out of movies.
We talk a lot on this series. It's something it's sort of a thing that Paul kind of coined, which is just hashtag content at this point, which is this idea that like there's a lot of stuff that just gets made, particularly maybe for streaming platforms and things like that just doesn't really have much of an idea behind it or much of a soul behind it, or there's just a lot of it that's just getting sort of churned out. And this is like the exact opposite of that. It feels like something that is, not only very intentional, like Paul said, but just something that like is truly like the voice of, I was going to say a single individual, but I guess two individuals in this case. But it feels like it's something that is not, cookie cutter, not made by committee or anything like that. But I am kind of curious, I brought this up in one of my questions I sent you guys at the beginning, earlier today. But this idea, I'm kind of curious as to how you guys think about theme in the movies and think about, because the story, there's obviously this sort of surface level of, a murder plot, assassination plot and all that kind of stuff that's dark. But it's actually kind of dark to think of Santa as being, subsidized by the United States government and not really, making ends meet and having to take on military contracts and do all that kind of stuff. Like, that's a funny gag, but is there anything under that for you guys felt like something that you wanted to talk about, or was that commentary on anything? Or it feels like such a dark undertone for Kris Kringle to even start out with. And then, obviously all the rest of the stuff that happens is darker in a way, or it's at least more violent in a way. But I'd be curious to know more about that.
I think a lot of it, like the themes that we're working with, come from, they just kind of pop up in the story as you start to write them, right? So you start to write a story about Santa Claus, and as I was saying, you start to go down these rabbit holes of like, okay, well, what would that really be like? And then you start thinking about, like the order of the world and the military's, like, what would they need Kris for? And it's sad, but I mean, yeah, there's like that whole bit is a commentary on, our government. And I mean, many governments are very similar, obviously, is that they're always looking for the advantage. They're not looking for the social benevolent reason for Santa Claus. They're looking for oh, great, this guy's got a great labor force. Like, how do we exploit that and use that into our favor? And I mean, and those are the things that we start going down the rabbit hole that are really fun to kind of start to think about and just kind of layer in there. And then it's like, oh yeah, well, you know, and then you get to the sort of sub layers and the layers upon layers where you're like, oh yeah, well, that means the military and the government are bad. Well, no, not really. It's just a function because it's not necessarily that the military and the government are bad, but they are a business, quote unquote, and that's really what businesses do. So it's not that there's I mean, yes, there's good and bad people in them, but it's something that functions, and that's what that function does. So of course it's going to be trying to exploit something out of a benevolent being who isn't really looking for anything for himself. And that was the other thing. We had a lot of fun just with a being like with Chris and Ruth, who are in it for just, they're in it for all the right reasons, and they have to deal with all the wrong things about society and life and military and government and world politics just to give somebody a frickin' present and exist and, you know, and spread love and happiness. And like, they can't even do that without getting completely corrupted and co-opted. And and those are the fun themes for us to play with. But again, like, you come like you see those scenes with the military and the government, and it's just, they're not malevolent. They're just well, look, Chris, like, you signed a contract with us, and like that's what the contract said. So we're trying to enforce that. And of course we need a certain amount of this and a certain amount of that if you're going to exist. And you have to find a way to pay your bills, Chris. No, we can't let you slide. Sorry. You know? But then the way that they find a way to let him slide is that they completely take advantage of him and his workforce, for their own selfish reasons. But again, the military shows up. You're like, oh, the military is going to be, there they are, the bad guys. But no, actually, these are just guys doing their job, to the best of their ability. And of course, we make them kind of the B team or the D team of the military because we did see this as, you just think of the setup, right? It's like, okay, we're going to make these, jet fighter parts over at Santa's workshop. He's a powerful being. He's got his own elves. It's underground. It's already, he's already pretty layered up on being hidden and safe over there because he runs his own business out of there and he hasn't really had a lot of trouble. So we really don't need that strong of a force over there. Like, let's send you over there, get you built up. And then we're just it's kind of a lazy day kind of operation. You're just going to be kind of cruising around. Yes, we need discipline. Yes, we need men on the floor, but we don't really need to, arm up that heavily because it's just, we're looking over our product, and yes, we want a certain amount of, we want a certain amount of force there, but it's not like, they've got the barbed wire fences up. You know what I mean? It's a pretty lazy operation and should be a pretty gravy job. But of course, what coincides with that is, this little kid hiring a maniac to come and storm his compound. And of course we had a lot of fun with that too. Then it's like, oh, this is going to be great. When this guy gets there, there's a little more than Chris and his elves there, and he's actually got to, make his way through the bushes and sneak around a little bit and take a few guys out, and then we could show how capable he is, and and how kind of ragtag this force is as he kind of busts down the door. And yeah, man, we were just having a lot of fun with a lot of that. And of course, the one badass there, the Captain Jacobs, guy, the one guy that's probably seen some wartime, puts up a fight, saves an elf or 20, and sacrifices himself in the process, which I think which is how I see our military force, honestly, which is in a very positive way. So yeah, we liked flipping that on people. I think that a lot of times they have a tendency to bring the military in and be like, oh yeah, it's this evil arm of the government, and they're going to come in and be a dictatorship and throw their weight around. And we had fun kind of playing that up front to let them be kind of enamored by the workforce and the ethics of the elves and Santa, and they all they realize, wow, we're not really that different. This is actually, I'm really digging this. We should work with these guys.
This is all those little scenes of the general or colonel, just being impressed by this is, yeah, absolutely. This is like a wonderful operation you guys have here. It's just, I always love that.
Then like when the cookies and candy canes come in, he's kind of all for it, which you probably weren't expecting either. He's like, well, okay, we should probably like to see you implementing this on the base later on. You know, he's ready to take it home with him.
Well, Sean and Paul are nice and cozy out in Georgia, but I live just outside of Salt Lake City, and it's been snowing all day today. And I bring that up because y'all filmed this movie outdoors in, what was it, Ontario, Canada, in the middle of winter, or Ottawa. There we go. Not the same place at all. How was that? How did you manage that? I'm sure the weather gave you some logistical issues, but what was it like filming outdoors in February in Canada?
Go ahead, Ash.
Oh man, well, sorry about that. I'm over at my folks' place right now, and they've had all of about 2 inches of rain, so the whole network has collapsed. So I had to reboot everything, but we're back up and running strong now. Ottawa was frosty. It was cold. It made us. I think it would take 2 guys from California to think gun battle in the snow is a good idea. We were definitely humbled. I remember one instance where, first of all, Ian and I went in, and I feel like they might have been a little judgy. Like, oh, these California boys, like, they're gonna come out here and really get it, really get their panties kicked. And so we made a pact. We were like, no matter how cold it gets, no matter what happens, you will never, ever hear either of us complain about the weather, right? I mean, I don't care if my hand breaks off my wrist. I'm not complaining. And so Ian and I are out there with the stunt crew, and they're like going through the storyboards and all this stuff. And, about 5 minutes went by, and the Grip Electric guy comes up to me and he goes, Ash, I was just timing you, and I was just kind of keeping an eye out on things. And like, I noticed that you had your gloves off for like 5 minutes. And I was like, oh yeah. He's like, how are your hands? I go, numb. Been numb for about 4 minutes now. And he goes, well, just so you know, like, you're going to start getting like irreparable frostbite like frostbite damage and nerve damage in about 6 minutes. And I was like, can I get some of those hand warmers and Hot Pockets, please? Like, it was honestly like a degree of weather that Ian and I were not used to encountering. Fortunately, we raided the local REI and got kitted up. And we by day 2 we looked like we were ready to summit Everest. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that, the hardest stuff we shot was the last fight in the snow, right? And that took us 4 days to shoot, from basically him Captain Jacobs, all the elves storming out. Captain Jacobs gets shot, the thing blows up, and then Chris says, hey, and they turn towards each other and they have the battle towards each other. It took us 4 days to shoot all that. There were 2 days that were the coldest. Of course, those were the 2 coldest days we were in Canada for the 5 months we were there.
Yeah, of course.
And it literally got negative 36.
Oh.
Negative 36 Fahrenheit.
Woo.
For us, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. It was 1 degree shy of when it was a mandatory shutdown.
Wow.
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
So they were like, well, we can shoot through that. We're not there yet. And we're like, oh, okay, cool.
We'll keep an eye on. Yeah. Like, because you've got the Grip and the first AD who are really dialed on safety, and they're keeping an eye on weather. They're keeping an eye on everything. I mean, luckily these guys have worked in Canada a ton, so they're keen on all these things. Where Esh and I'd be out there at negative 40, dead, within a couple of hours, and not known that we should have gone inside.
That's insane. That is insane. I shot a documentary in New York in January. And it's the coldest. It was like negative 15 pretty much the whole time I was there, and that was the coldest I've ever been, I think, consistently in my life. I can't even imagine a negative 30 plus like shoot.
Yeah,
that's testament to the crew, and to honestly, so this is what's even more insane is like Gibson. He just loves being on set, right? He just wants to hang around. So we're out there shooting. And we turned around, and he's just chilling. And mind you, he's got some stuff under his costume, but he's got some thermals and things like that, and some Hot Pockets and stuff like that. But he's not in a North Face coat. He's not in an Eddie Bauer. He's not kitted for like Ian and I were. And we turn around and he's sitting there and he's drinking a green tea, regaling the crew, telling everyone stories of Braveheart and all this great stuff, which we're like trying to get in on that, you know? And we're like, oh shoot, Mel, did you not hear? Like, you were cut. You can go back to the warming tent. And he's like, oh no. You guys are out here. Everybody's out here. I'm out here. Like, he just understood. He just understands innately what it takes, because he's been on both sides of the camera, right? He understands how to galvanize a crew to get out there and like, well, Gibson's out here in his costume. Like, who are we to complain?
So I got to ask this question, actually. Like, I assume you would have had to have. I mean, Mel Gibson obviously has he's been in some of the greatest movies of all time, but he's also directed some of the greatest movies of all time. And I have to imagine you guys spent a lot of time talking to him. What did you get advice, or just what did you sort of soak up about direction from talking to Mel?
Everything we could. We pumped that guy the entire shoot and post. Pumped him constantly. I mean, I think when you have a guy like that, I mean, you gotta try to get as much out of him as you can. I mean, he was forthcoming at times, but I mean, not. We got a lot more out of him than we should have, because we just kept after him, and we just kept asking him tons of questions about some of our favorite movies that not only he starred in, but that he shot, or that he's directed, and I mean, there were some wonderful lessons that we got in post as well. He was telling us about this cool thing in Braveheart where we were like, oh, how'd you shoot this? And how'd you shoot that? And what'd you do there? And what'd you do this? And he was like, oh, because there's a cool moment in Braveheart where, just a small example, there's a cool moment in Braveheart where he's killing all the, I think, people on the Senate that went up against him and voted to kill him and stalk him or to track him down. And he starts going through all those guys and taking them out. And there's this one scene where one of the guys is in bed, and he has this dream that William Wolfe comes through his door on a horse and I think hits him in the face with a mace or something like that. And he wakes up scared and he goes, oh, thank God that was a nightmare. And then William Wallace really does come through the wall or the door with a mace and hits him in the face. And you get to see some of the gore there. And it's just a flash of it, but it's enough to make you go, oh my God. And it's such a great moment. It's such a great effect. And we were like, how did you shoot that? We were like, because you can't, it's seemingly all one shot. And so he just kind of broke down for us about how he double printed these frames and how they swapped out this head. And like, he was just giving us like real practical ways that he did some of these effects in camera, because we love in camera effects because they always seem to look a little bit better, And if you do have a mistake on those practical effects, you kind of want to doctor them up in post, and that's it. You don't want a full digital effect, because it just kind of looks like a mess. Or unreal. So we were pumping him for a lot of that stuff, because we were doing a lot of in-camera stuff. We were working with a lot of guns, and he was having to handle a lot of guns, as was Walton. And just all every trick we could get out of him, or every scene that had any relation to what we were shooting and didn't have a relation, we were pumping him about it. If we dug it, we were like, how did you do this? How did you shoot that? And then in post, sorry. I was
just going to ask, did he have any sort of general advice about filmmaking that you thought was particularly valuable, or something that you wish you'd known 10 years earlier, or something like that?
I'll say that there was
a couple. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ash. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's a couple instances, right? Well, there was one where we were going kind of out of our way to get a clean sound. Okay. And he was, I don't worry about that yet.
I think you're breaking up, Ash.
Yeah, Ash breaking up a little bit.
We have one opportunity to shoot a picture, right? You guys handle it.
Okay, I can tell that story. I know it. So I know what he's talking about. So there was this moment where we were trying to get a really clean take for sound, and what that meant is that we that you had to basically not shoot Mel's side, for the guy to dip in with the boom mic or whatever. And I remember that we actually wanted to roll on it, and then the sound guy was nervous about it, didn't want us to roll on it, and it was a big confusion. But ultimately, Mel came afterwards, like, man, you guys do not want to shoot. He's like, you want to shoot as much of the visuals as you can. He's like, because we're not gonna be able to come back and get that. He's like, if you sacrifice a take for sound, he's like, I mean, come on, we could rebuild the sound and do all that in post in LA or wherever at any time. He's like, we cannot rebuild the visual anywhere. So he's like, and that I think went along with a bigger theme of not compromising, right? Which, I mean, there's always little compromises you're making along the way, but to compromise anything that you really want in the movie, which ends up being really like your voice in the movie. So like, get the visuals you need and try not to compromise as much as possible, because that really is your voice. That's what makes you original. That's what makes you stand out. I mean, that was one of the big ones there.
Yeah. He also like wants to know what lens is on every camera all the time. Which is really cool. And honestly, like we've had actors ask us that, but never to the degree that Mel queried about it. And I remember at one point he came in and he was like, "Oh, hey, what's that lens on that camera back there?" And we're like, "Oh, I think that's our long lens." And he's like, "Oh, what is that, like a 75, 80?" I go, "You know what? It's around there. I got to go ask Johnny, the DP." And he goes, "What's that one?" We go, "Oh, that's more of our normal." And he was like, "Okay, what's the millimeter on that?" And so we went and asked Johnny. And then we came back in the next setup. He asked us the exact same thing. I know because we're looking at the monitor, we're framing up the shots, we storyboard every frame of the movie, but we didn't know exactly what millimeter to the millimeter every lens was. And Mel wants to know those details. He's a detail oriented guy, and like honestly, like nothing gets past him on the set.
Yeah. So one of our producer asked me this question. And I think it's an interesting area. And then, you guys are obviously working on, a lot of projects right now. I'd be curious to know if you have any thoughts on the kind of the state of the industry. And one of the things that Pavel asked me here was about film versus digital. And if you guys have any preferences. We already talked a little bit about a preference towards in-camera effects and things like that. But how do you feel about just the state of the technology?
I think the tech's never been better. Ian and I enjoy the filmic look. I haven't found a lot of high frame rate stuff that I like yet.
Yeah.
We have never shot a movie on film.
Yeah.
I don't know that we ever will. It's so when you get down to breaking down the budget, it just demands so much money and resources, and risking scratch prints and things like that. I don't know that it'll be ever worth it for us, but
there's also
the digital revolution we fully embrace.
There's also an incredible versatility with digital that you don't have with film right off the bat. And like Ash was saying, like you got to go process it, develop it, and then turn it digital. Whereas we've had a lot of I wouldn't say good fortune, but it's like we've had a lot of luck with the way that we wanted our film to look, and then our DP Johnny coming in and saying, "Well, I think we can do that if we do this." And it's not that we're trying to avoid film; it's just that the look we really enjoy, we've been able to make it work with digital, with either like filmic, filters, and then a certain color correction. And then, it's like, why risk for us? It's like, why risk, the complications / budget overages of having film and shooting film, and the complications that could happen, just with chemicals. We grew up, Esham and I grew up, our dad was a photographer for 20 some odd years. Both our parents were. And we know firsthand how easy, film can be screwed up, if you just have the wrong chemical mix in the water. The
developer's not right or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that person is inexperienced, whether that they made a mistake or, this much, half a cup of this went in or a fourth a cup of that went in instead of this or that, or because you're still working in dark rooms, you're still working in like tough environments, and you're looking for precision. So you're never going to get, I don't know, it's easier to get that precision when you're trying to dial it digitally. And we're just skipping a few steps of having to shoot film, transfer it to digital, and then start screwing with it. So it just makes sense for us.
But when we got into film, the transition had already happened, but our roadmap was always going to be digital because the film had already kind of died by the time we got in.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch, especially the last 10 years or so, the shift. I mean, even the studio that Paul and I are in here, we have cameras that, would be perfectly appropriate to shoot, shorts and things like that on. And 10 years ago, that just wouldn't have even really been possible. I mean, I think the kind of stuff that's available today, at prices that are actually achievable, is pretty wild. I mean, we have an Arri Alexa in here, for goodness sakes. An older one at this point. But this is a camera that maybe was $85,000 a few years ago. That now is I don't know what.
Yeah, I mean
10 or so. But yeah.
So kind of going off that, with the technology being so good and so cheap, what's your best piece of advice for a filmmaker wanting to get into this or start their career? Would it be focused more on the craft, videography, cinematography, or more writing, or both? What do you guys think?
I think you need all of it.
Well, it depends on what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be a cinematographer, then the technology and the cameras are of paramount importance. If you want to be a filmmaker, I think in the beginning, Ian and I had to be very tech forward because we were making our own stuff, and so you have to have a knowledge of the cameras and the editing software and all that, and the codecs and all that stuff to make it all agree. Johnny Durango, our cinematographer, who we shot the last 4 movies with, and a lot of that technological burden has been gladly shifted to him. And when we're like, it changes so fast. The lifespan of these cameras is so ephemeral. You read a manual for one and it's obsolete the next month. So it's like, you can't even, it's just, these folks, these ACs, they're saints for trying to keep up with that.
Yeah. I'd say for young filmmakers, or for not even young filmmakers, people making films, honestly, because I think the first struggles that we had were, okay, how do we write something that's entertaining? Let's work on make this entertaining. And that should be your first goal. It should be entertaining, whether you're shooting it on your iPhone, you're shooting it on an Arri Alexa, or you're shooting on anything. Try to figure out how to make your stories work, whether they're dramatic, funny, action, whatever. Try to figure out how to have good writing and good characters and have people care about them. And then what happened to us is we made 2 feature films and probably a dozen short films that Esham and I wrote, directed, and shot. And we're our own cameramen and did our own lighting with help from our dad at times. And we learned a ton. We learned a ton about the basics, the bare bones basics of making movies. And our writing got a lot better. We became better writers because we kept making stuff. Now, there was one point where we've been friends with Johnny Durango since we started making films. Esham and Johnny started making safety videos together back in the early 2000s. And Esham was running cable and coffee for Johnny as he was DPing these safety videos in skyscrapers in LA. And it was just a commercial, crappy job. But you're getting paid to make, you're getting paid to make movies, make infomercial, make safety videos, whatever you can get your hands on. And Johnny came over and he'd watched everything we'd made, and he came over and watched, I think it was Night of the Dog, which was our second feature. And he said, "Do you know what the problem with this movie is?" And we were like, "What?" He's like, "That I didn't shoot it." And he was absolutely right, because we were like, all right, well, let's see about that. Because Esham and I were shooting it. We're like, oh, you think you can do better with, $800? Let's see what you got, buddy. And so we teamed up with him and went and shot a short film, which was like the pilot for a web series, basically, that a friend of ours had written, Jen Fee. And she'd done a killer job on this. And we were like, okay, well, we want to shoot this. And she brought us on to direct it. And we brought Johnny on to help us DP it. And it was Esham and I directing, one of us holding the boom or holding the camera. And or I guess at that point, Johnny was holding the camera, but one of us holding the boom or standing behind camera, directing the actors. And then Johnny was doing lighting. And so it was a 3-man crew, basically. And that was the same dynamic we'd had on those first 2 features, is that there was like a 3-man crew. But this time, Johnny brought his camera. Johnny brought his lights. Johnny rented a light and rented a lens. And we were like, do you really need to rent a light and rent a lens? Come on, man. And I mean, for people, we were making like a $900 webisode. And for us, that $200 that we spent to rent that light and rent that lens for the day, because I think we shot 2 days, was like astronomical. You know, we were just like, you just added $200 to a $900 budget. Like, is this absolutely necessary? And he's like, hey, do you want depth of field? Do you want to be able to see your actors? Do you want dynamic lighting? And we're like, all right, we'll put up $200. Let's see how this goes. So, you know, the quality was astronomically different. I mean, it was like we went from, if you were judging it, you'd be like,
YouTube
oh yeah, that
video.
Like a homemade YouTube video, to like, oh, this could probably pop up on, you know, Showtime, and you'd buy it as a real show, you know, or it would pop up on FX or something, and you'd be like, yep, this is a professionally made product.
Well,
it has
I think we kind of went from like, it was definitely, I mean, you know, we weren't a YouTube series, but it was pretty rough around the edges. And we knew just enough to be dangerous in our lighting skills.
Yeah, but Johnny brought a whole new element to the game, and it just showed, and it just looked really professional. It looked like a great product. It looked like a real movie, you would say, quote unquote, you know? And that was a huge step for us, because now, you know, I won't say we were the greatest writers, but we were definitely entertaining. We were winning film festivals. We were winning audience awards and writing awards at film festivals. So, I mean, we were pretty good, you know, we knew how to write entertaining stuff. And then his extra level of, you know, just production value of what he brought, just in know-how, and a couple of $100, it was night and day. Like, it was night and day. And then he went and shot on, he's gone on to shoot our next 4 features, and, you know, we've all grown and leveled up together. And it's been a really incredible experience, because we have such a shorthand with that guy. We literally call him the third Nelms brother at this point, because he's so integral to our work. And, you know, it's funny, when we were shooting Fatman, Mel was like, who's shooting this? And we're all, Johnny Durango. We shot the last 3. He's like, is that his real name? Like, yeah, that's his real name. But by the end of the shoot, Mel, you know, and in post and everything, Mel watched the film, was really impressed with how it looked. And, you know, Mel's literally courting Johnny to shoot his next movie. So we were like, all right, wait a minute. Johnny, you still got to leave your calendar open for us. But it's just a testament to how hard that guy works. And that's what you do across the board, right? You pick people that are working, you know, as hard as you hope that you're working, right? You're spending your soul and your heart on this thing, and you got to find those collaborators that are in it as hard as you are, because at the end of the day, that's, you know, you're as strong as your weakest link. And if somebody's not going as hard as you are, it shows, you know, and that department or that place suffers. And, you know, we really try to surround ourselves with people that are killing themselves to make this thing. And whether that's because they believe in the product, or it's because they want to do a great job because they're trying to learn to make their features later, like, that's what's important. You know, people that work hard like that, like, they succeed and they push through and they find a way to pop out from what we've seen.
So, you know, that really shows on Fatman, and that I think I kind of want to kind of bring it home with one more question for you guys, which is really just what's next and what are you guys working on? And we talked a minute ago about a sequel or possible sequel to Fatman. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that. But yeah, just what are you guys working on, and where are we going to see you again?
You want to start, Ash? Or
we got a bunch of irons in the oven. We always got something. Ian and I we can't just sit around on our hands. But we got something kind of like a Ozarksiest thriller that we're working on right now, and hopefully we'll get to run off and shoot that pretty soon. We got a little Western we're working on, which we're excited to get after that. And then, I don't want to give too much about, you know, what the Fatman sequel might entail, but yeah, we got that offer as well. We're tooling on that.
Yeah, there's with the Fatman sequel, of course, there's just a lot of logistics and schedules and rights, and because you're dealing with a certain amount of producers and the distributor and then us, and then you've just got a lot of elements, and all the actors you know, that we see coming back in the second one. You just kind of it's so much logistical stuff that you can see why these studios and these bigger production companies, you know, if they think it's something that's going to go on for more than 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, that they usually have a deal of like, hey, you're gonna you're going to carve out time for this when we have a second one, right? You know, and hey, you got to sign this and come back for this one if you're going to do this. And you can see why that happens, because as we're caught up in the logistical stuff, I mean, you make a movie, it comes out. We were very fortunate that this was successful, even in a time of where it couldn't have a theatrical release, and it was mainly digital, and it was incredibly successful for the distributor and for us and for the actors, and they're all pumped to do another one. But everyone was like a year out on their schedules by the time it was like, hey, this did well enough to do another one. You guys want to do another one? And then, of course, things are compounding, and they're still signing on to projects, and they're still doing stuff. And it's like, okay, shoot, when is everybody who has to carve time out for this going to be able to carve the same time out for it? And then is it pushing out something that they would have gotten, you know, I don't know, a bigger payday, or they would have gotten, you know, it's something that they're personally invested in that they really wanted to do, so they can't push that out, and then that doesn't work for this actor. And you know, so it's just a lot of that type of stuff, and getting the rights sewed up at the same time that we're trying to do. But everyone's pumped to do another one, as are we. We have our ideas. We've pitched them to the distributor and the financiers, and they're pumped about them. So it's like, you know, but again, you know, we've got these other projects we're working on as well. So, you know, that's the thing, like, right. I mean, our schedule's like, okay, we'll do this one, then we'll do that one, then we'll do the sequel to Fatman. And then, you know, I don't know, as you saw, you always have this game plan of like, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, but then sometimes, you know, 1A, 1B, and 1C sneak in there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're dealing with but that's the other thing, right? Is that, again, with the schedules, it's like you're waiting for someone to sign on for a certain period of time, and then that time lapses, and you're like, well, shoot, we should go do this while we're waiting for this. And then, you know, and then that ends up taking 2 or 3 months longer than you thought. And then, yeah, we're going to get to it. It's going to happen. It's taking a minute for the sequel. The short answer to that is, the other thing is we're excited about a season 2 of EDG, which is Everybody's Doing Great, which is a Hulu series we were executive produced with James Lafferty and Michelle Lang, our producer, who we've worked with on our last 4 films as well. But yeah, like that second season should be rallying up here in a few months. We're excited to do that. We've got a lot of fun stuff. There's a film that we're producing for a friend of ours titled Guidance. That's such a great script that we have Dale Dickey in the lead of right now, that we couldn't be more pumped about. Hoping to shoot that this summer. But yeah, there's a lot. There's always a lot, right? And it's like, it's hard to get too excited, because as things get pushed and move around, you're like, okay, I was talking about that then, but that's actually 1.5 years from now.
Yeah.
Paul, I want to give you the last word, Paul.
That's exciting. Well, first of all, I appreciate you guys joining us. I have thoroughly enjoyed hearing more about your guys' story and how the journey from the idea of Fatman to the screen, getting it on screen, it's phenomenal. It's a great story of just sticking with it and going where you needed to go in the time. But I mean, this, in my household, the Nelson family household, this Fatman's going to be one of those movies that is on rotation. It's added in. It's a Christmas story. It's on the rotation for sure. So appreciate that story bringing in, and definitely going to be one that when my boys are old enough, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while. They're 5 and 3, but they're going to see it. And
they're old enough.
Yeah,
they're old.
I will say, I finally got my wife to watch it. She's one of those people where Hallmark movies are a little too violent for her, and I finally got her to watch it last night, and I didn't push her too hard on it, asking her opinion last night. But I woke up this morning. She rolled over and she's like, "I've been thinking about that this morning. I really liked it." I was like, "Whoa!" But that's the reaction I get from pretty much everyone that I recommend this movie to, is that it's fantastic. So it's great work. So
we have all recommended this movie to a ton of people, and I will continue to do it. Much like Paul, I think, year after year, it's definitely in rotation at this point. And it's my household is like a Nightmare Before Christmas kind of household, and I'll actually keep it in that vein. To be honest, it's quirky, it's funny, it's got all kinds of heart, and it's just comes out of a completely unexpected place. So, man, I just thank you guys for making it. It's just been fantastic to get to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for having us, and
thank you very much.
It means a mountain.
Sean,
it honestly
Paul,
does.
It's been fun chatting with you guys, and we really appreciate you letting us come on and chat. And I'm so happy that you guys are allowing Fatman into your holiday rotation.
Absolutely. So
thank you, Jen, so much.
For all of our listeners and watchers right now, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this podcast. If you're a Patreon or a Subscribe Star supporter, we're not going to do a bonus episode this week. We apologize for that, but we wanted to make this episode available to everybody. And so thank you guys, just from the bottom of our hearts. You've made the show possible, and you've made everything we're doing Without a Frame possible. So we appreciate you guys, and we will see you next time.